Hi, everybody. So what we're going to be doing in this critique is looking at everybody's character projects and focusing on some new things, I guess, in the character designs. Um, the assignment asks you to just keep working, refining your project, and maybe making some corrections, if you have any kind of sort of small kind of cosmetic imperfections in your photographs. We've learned how to correct those, so that's going to be something that you focused on. And what we'll also take a look at is just the design of the character. We'll revisit the backgrounds, maybe revisit the text a little bit, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit too just about sort of polishing the design with an eye towards looking at color, which I think can really be a very great thing to play with at this stage. Now that you have some of the tools to experiment with color, we'll look at how we can kind of create a really good sort of strong palette for your design. And some of you are already heading in that direction anyhow, so it'll just be, refining that a little bit. We'll also talk about maybe adding some movement to the character design, which I think can be really, really fun to do at this point and sort of bring your character to life. What tends to happen is when people are designing their character and putting it together, they kind of put it in a sort of a, just a sort of a basic sort of standing position, but there's all kinds of things you can do with your character, whether it's just moving the, arms and legs around or tilting the head, or you can go further and you can work with puppet warp as well, which can be really great. If you remember back in, I think it was milestone 3, when you tip the head backwards, uh, that using that called the puppet warp technique, that is really a fun thing to work with. Um, and let's see, so adjustment layers are the thing that you were going to be adding, one of the requirements, and I'm pretty sure everybody's got a few layer or adjustment layers in their character, but maybe there's an opportunity to keep building it. And so we'll kind of focus a little bit too on maybe some things we can do with adjustment layers that you didn't know about. We'll see. Okay, sorry about that. Let's get started. Okay, Jolene, just move this around a little bit here. Yeah, so I think your design is looking pretty good to me. It's like almost done. It has that sense of being quite complete. Um, so let's start just talking a little bit about what should we start with? Um, let's start talking a little bit about the background. So the background, I really like this background and I like the blurring that you've done, like the gradual blurring. One thing I would just say, and it's my fault because I don't think I explained it very well last week how to do this. And I'm glad, so you duplicated the layer, which is fantastic. You can also do like a smart object with the layer, but I sometimes find that duplicating a layer I tend to like it a little bit. I find it easier to work with the blurring, so I think it's great that you did that. But so the only thing I would do here with this layer is when you blur it, try to get the bottom bit here in focus because that's naturally what would be in focus. Because if the feet are in focus, whatever the feet is standing on, that's the same distance from the camera, so that will be in focus too. Um, and what that will also do with the background, it will t typically if there's too much blurring, in one area, like the whole background, then the eye doesn't really have a place to kind of sit. And so that also helps to kind of just ground the viewer a little bit more. So you can go, let me see if I can do this a little bit more straightforwardly this time with your the layer that you've provided here. Let's duplicate that again so that we've got yet another one. Why not? There we go. I just have to move things around a little bit. So um, let me just get this into the view here. Okay, so with this new background, you just go to the filtered and go to field blur right here. I mean, you can do either one, but let's do a field blur. And so you want to take the whole, it'll naturally want to default to being the entire thing being blurred. You know, it'll start off at that position. But if you turn it down to 0, then what you can do is control where you want the blurring. So now you can use the push pins and you can start maybe at the top like you did, you know, blurring the top as much as you want, right? Just, you know, exactly what you did here. And then just go down. You can just sort of go down, sort of slight, and then have slighter blurs. That way you can kind of control the blurring and have this bottom be unblurred. So you can give that a try. Um, and let me just cancel this out of here. So your color, so let's talk a little bit about your color. So your color, I think, has been pretty harmonized since the beginning. You know, you don't have a lot, and typically when we look for color harmonies, what we're always trying to do is build a kind of more limited palette, like a sort of more focused palette. You know, if you have every single color in the color wheel, then what happens is that you get sort of a fragmented design. And since color is one of, I think, one of the most powerful design elements, it really can allow you to unify the design. So by having fewer colors, you typically get a much stronger design. From maybe one color to, I think, maximum of maybe 3 dominant colors. And when I build a color palette, I just usually start with the colors that I've naturally chosen. So in your case, you've got orange, you've got blue, and then you've got sort of various gray tones, you know, black to white, which I consider to be like a kind of one type of color. So essentially you have like 3 colors, or you could say you have orange and yellow too. But they seem to all kind of go together already. So I don't know if you have to do a whole lot with color. You might want to, what I noticed with your arms here is that, you know, your head is very bright and saturated, which is great. I think that looks really beautiful. But I noticed that maybe the arms, like the bristles here, seem a little bit faded in comparison. So you could maybe take these arms and you could maybe apply a layer mask to them. Um, and you know, just hue and saturation are the sort of, I think, the adjustment layers that we tend to use the most. Just clip that there, and you could, you know, experiment and just sort of like slightly just maybe saturate it a little bit. You see how just even a little bit, suddenly now it starts feeling like it's not being kind of left out of the picture. Sort of seems a little more balanced. You could try that. Um, and yeah, otherwise I think your color looks, I think it looks good. So the other thing that I might play with here is a little movement. Um, like I talked about in my intro, you think about what could happen with your character. Sometimes I think it's good to sort of think about what is your character doing. Is your character, maybe your character could be just like walking, and you can sort of imagine a person walking and make your character sort of follow those same motions with their legs and their arms. Or maybe, you know, your character is just standing, you know, it's waving, or it's, you know, it's doing something else with just any type of body position. Um, you know, just to kind what that does is that I think that when you do that, because we're working with all these different objects and we're trying to make them look like they belong together, like they belong to a living, breathing creature, that when you start adding those kinds of movements, it just gives it that extra kind of thing, you know, that makes it look like it's alive. Like even sort of small things like just even changing the positions of the arms, you know, in different ways, or um, those can work. Sort of things where maybe it's, and I'm just you know, just kind of moving them around here to um, you know, just to show you that just moving them can be a way to make them seem more, you know, like something's happening with them. So you could try that. Again, you could also try puppet warp if you like the puppet warp technique. So, sometimes people in the past have kind of done things with, like if they have a really big torso with straight lines, they've kind of maybe added a little bit of, you know, curves maybe that looks like it's sort of breathing, or it's, you know, got some kind of, you know, living movement in it. Could try that, you know. Puppet warp, you have to, we haven't really, we did it in the exercise Remember, again, with moving the guy's head backwards. Um, so we haven't done a lot with Puppet Warp, but it's definitely fun to experiment with to try to, see what it can do, really kind of play with it. So you give that a try, but otherwise you can just sort of move things around a little bit. Even something like tilting the body a little bit, like, because our bodies are oftentimes they're sort of tilted in different directions, can also sort of make things come alive, you know. Again, just not, I don't think I did a good job here at all, but you get the idea that just sort of small little kind of subtle changes can really make a difference. Okay, so that's probably what I would work on. Anything else that you see that you think you want to kind of play with that comes, you want to experiment with? The beauty of working digitally is because, and non-destructively, is that whatever you do, you can totally, spend a few minutes just experimenting, and if you don't like the results, you can reverse it, either in the history panel or if you save your character as a previous version. I like to save a lot of versions of things. You can just open up that file and go back to where you were before. Okay, all right, well, have fun and good job. Okay, Alexandria, yeah, the levels adjustment. So you added it, it looks like, in a few different places. Yeah, and it looks like you added it, rather than clipping it, you added it for the entire design, which you definitely can do. Oftentimes what we are doing is we're just adding it to individual layers, you know. Um, but sometimes you definitely can, if you want to change the whole design, like brighten it up, whatever you want to do, darken it, add some more contrast, um, that can really work well. Okay, so, I'm going to actually say pretty much the same thing as I said to Jolene, which is I think that your color harmony is actually complementary. It's like red and green. So they're opposite on the color wheel. Not that this is a color theory class. I just noticed that in yours. But in whatever case, whatever harmony everyone ends up with, again, you don't necessarily have to have a traditional color harmony to have a strong color scheme. You can just be very conscious about the colors you're using, and try to limit your palette. Um, so I think your colors are looking good. I would experiment with movement with your character because I think your character is looking really good. But what else can you do with her to maybe bring her to life a little bit more? What would Garden Glitter Grace be doing? Maybe she would just be sort of standing in her garden looking at things. Um, but you can sort of think about how could you maybe bring her to life a little bit more? Um, Maybe just simple things like having her arms in different positions, or, you know, you already have quite a lot of kind of curves and things in your body, but maybe even just, I don't know, sort of small thing. You can kind of experiment, like maybe her head would be tilted to the side, sort of looking, or, one of her arms could be a little bit up. You can sort of experiment with how that might work. Again, just to kind of sort of get her just a little more engaged in the scene. You know, um, and so your text. So I just turned on your text because I remembered it was there before. Something with your text is I would think about. So you have yellow and, or pardon me, green and pink. So I might think about maybe making your text one of those colors to blend it in. Not that you can't necessarily add a third color in here, but it's really the only place where you have yellow. And when you try to unify colors, you sort of think about like this pink down here is sort of repeated in different places. The reds are repeated, the greens are repeated, and that's what makes them work in the design. And the yellow is the only thing in the design. So I would be inclined to change that. I don't think I have this color, this particular text, but what you could do is you could go, maybe whatever was readable, like it could be a red or a light pink, or, maybe a yellow. There's sort of kind of a greeny yellow in here. Maybe that would work too. That you can actually, I don't think I can probably do it because I don't have the character. Let's see. It'll actually probably uh, ask me to change the, I'll show you what I mean though. It'll change the font on me, I think, but we'll try anyhow. So what you can do is, let me do that again just to show you. So in the characters panel, if you're clicking on text, if you're clicking on any text, and you open the character panel, then you can make all kinds of changes in here without doing anything more to the text, like selecting it or going onto the design itself. And the same with the color. So here's the color right now. So if I click here, it'll automatically open the color picker. And the color picker, if you go directly into the design at this point, there's nothing else you need to do. The eyedropper tool opens up, and you can click actually anywhere in your design, and it will sample that part, that whatever's underneath it. So you can see I'm sort of going through here and sampling different colors that, just sort of experimenting what would work here. There's kind of a bluish color in here. So you can see a lot of these are not working because they are too light. So maybe the dark one, I don't know. I'm always sort of thinking that sometimes if you can get a better option from something that's sort of a black color, it looks better, but or maybe a dark red. But anyhow, you get that idea that you can sort of bring that like any color in here into your design. I would say the same thing too as Jolene about your background, which is that if you can, it would be great if the whole design wasn't blurred, if you had this in focus. I see that this layer is in here. Let's see. I think the layer underneath is blurred. So if you have the original, what you could do is bring that back in and just use the field blur that we went over to have anything under her feet in focus. I think that could help your design quite a lot. And yeah, I think those are the main things. I might kind of play around with the branch arms a little bit. They seem like they're getting a little lost in the background compared to the other elements. Can you see? And that's just because they're not as strong a color as compared to, and they're lighter, they're smaller. So maybe they could be a brighter color. Maybe you could blur a little bit more, um, up here so that the branches show up. You could sort of experiment with that a little bit more. So that's what I think you should work on at this point. Yeah, just keep experimenting a little bit more. Hey, Molly, so this is actually from I think last week, and I just pulled this into the critique so we could actually talk about this um, in a little bit more detail. So your character, I think, is Flippin' Food Fran. I think. Um, So that would be something you want to include in the text, Flippin' Food Fran. And let's just turn off this background for the moment and look at your character design. So I think your character design is coming along quite nicely. I would love to see your character design a little bit bigger. You really want, on in your own kind of development of designs, of course you can do whatever you want in terms of the background, the character. So you might want to save this particular design for something for yourself. But in this particular, I think, assignment, that because the character itself is where we're actually working on all these techniques of collaging, the layer mask and that kind of thing, you really want that to be a lot stronger because that's really where your work is shown, whereas the background is something you probably just pulled from the internet. And that, choosing a good photograph is in itself a skill. So I don't want to, demean that in any way. But I do think that it's important that you make the character really a big part of it. So make it bigger, like go all the way up to here, and then maybe put your text at the top. That's often a, good solution here. Or the opposite, you can move your character up a little bit and put your text at the bottom and then fill this space in here. Then the next thing I would do, it looks like you've got your layer mask here, which is great. Then I would find another background, even though this is a beautiful photograph and it's just wonderful, fruits and that kind of thing. But find something that's not based out of made out of food, that's a different background, a simple background that won't compete with your character because your character is already made out of food. And so by putting more food in the background, you're kind of just, it blends into that. So, you can see by the other students, some of the students' ideas, in terms of backdrops, like it's how you might play with this, like is flipping food, maybe she's um, on a table, or maybe she's on a, in a kitchen, on a kitchen counter, or on a plate, something very simple, simple background that will really highlight her. All right, okay, that's where I'd go from now. So do your best to kind of really, push this a little bit further, and then the next critique we'll take another look at it, and hopefully we'll, be further along, and we can work on the next level of things. Amanda, okay, yes, I think your background's looking good. I like the kind of blurring that you've done up here. I think your text looks really good and your character's really coming along. Um, okay, let's see what we can do here to, just, we're always about trying to take it to the next level. And, yeah, that flower. So it's interesting because when I looked at it, I thought, oh, that purple, that looks nice. But I can see how maybe you thought the yellow looked nice too. Definitely, I think that looks really pretty. Um, but if you want to change it to another color, one of the things so I'm always a big fan of using hue and saturation as an adjustment layer. I just think it's really easy and works with a lot of different situations. But in your particular flower, for whatever reason, I think if you look at it, it's sort of the purple now with the hue and saturation layer. Can you see how it's kind of like flattened? It's taken a lot of the really beautiful shadows that make this flower so cool and kind of, and in a way, erase them. So another adjustment layer that you can try, a different one, I'll show you it, is, let's go here, click on the layer, go to selective color. We're at the very bottom. Let's just make sure our layer is clipped. And with selective layer, this is a really interesting area because it allows you to selectively choose what color in your image you're going to work with. Now it's not going to be that dramatic with this flower because this flower is mostly, I think, sort of yellow, oranges, But if you had a really more complex photograph that had multiple colors and you just wanted to change one, like you had a little bit of blue and you just wanted to change that blue, this is the area. So if you go in this drop down menu right here, you can see that there's these big categories of colors. So in your case, let's choose yellow. Let's start with yellow. We might have to go with red. Can you notice there's no orange here? And your image has a bit of orange. So we'd have to use the color wheel and combine yellow and red. So let's start with yellow here. So now it's only going to change yellow. So what we'd want to do here, again, it really helps to sort of, refresh your memory of the color wheel. But we would want to, if we want to make it magenta, we'd want to maybe remove the yellow, and that's not doing much. Oops, sorry, no, I'm sorry, I was on the wrong one. Remove the yellow here. So now you see it's sort of really gotten quite a bit paler. And now what we can do is we can add in the cyan and magenta. Cyan is really just blue, so purple and blue, and kind of, see, let's turn the magenta off. So we could, now there's a lot of red in this image, so let's go to red and do exactly the same thing. We will remove the yellow here, and then we can just let's add in some blue. So you can see that all of the beautiful detail that we had before is still there. You can play with it. I think yours was a little more blue. I don't remember, but you can sort of play with these sliders. You can kind of make it a little bit darker, lighter, but I think that's fine. But you can see sort of how you could make it any color you wanted to. With that technique, again, what happens is you can see if you look at the difference here between, the hue and saturation versus the color, selective color, how much better that looks. So it's a good tool. So everybody, if you're looking to really dramatically change the color, that's really the way to go. And again, I actually think you could actually also make it red, which I think would, in a way, red would, let's go back in here, and if we made it red, the adjustment layer, oh, hold on. There we go. If we made the adjustment red, then it would match your text. So that could be a way to go too. In that case, we'd want to amp up the yellow, add more yellow and maybe take out, I don't know, some of the blue, sort of play around with that. So yeah, you can, well, so you could really, I think you could make it redder than that, but you see you can really take a lot of different approaches here. Um, so the other thing I would do with your character design is maybe add a little movement to your character. Just play around with that. Maybe she's just, how when people stand on one leg, like most people don't stand straight up and down. They're tilted a little bit or they kind of lean on one leg. You can even just look at photographs of people to see how people do that and how they might just have a little bit of curve in their body or, you know, maybe one foot is off to the side a little bit or their arms are in different positions. Their head is angled. You can kind of play with that a little bit. I think that would be nice with your character design. Whatever kind of pose you think that she might like to be in. I might, for the background, um, something with the background that you might try. So right now there's this very sort of noticeable angle here. You see this angle here? And if you think that it's important to have that angle here, then I would keep it. But if you don't, then I would probably want to um, straighten it. And the crop tool allows you to straighten things, but when you have a lot of layers, it can get a little, oops, that's not the layer I wanted. I think I wanted this one right here. But you can actually just kind of um, straighten it so that it looks like the background is straight, and then the eye will perceive it straighter. You could even move it up a little bit or down a little bit. In a way, this is like, I'm not really necessarily a big fan of the rule of three, where you want to divide things into three, your design space. But sometimes I think yours was right in the middle, and sometimes I think that can look a little awkward, so sometimes it's better to have it like a little higher, so it's not so, you could try that. I'm not sure about these elements in here. I kind of feel like maybe they're distracting. These ones on the side, they just, I'm not sure. Again, it's sort of like, do they add another dimension to your design, or do they make it just busier? And I think in your case, they maybe just make it a little busier because we already have all this beautiful foliage on your character. We don't necessarily need more. So I might consider taking those side pieces out. Um, okay, so I think yeah. So and actually when we moved up, I noticed that the leaves were a little hard to see, and when we moved this background up, they just popped into focus again. So that might be a good idea. All right, so I hope that gives you a little bit more to play with. Again, this flower, I think it could be stay yellow, or if you want to change it to another color, hopefully the selective color will give you, the option to do whatever you want with that. Okay, Austin, yes, I do think you've done a nice job here at kind of changing the color on the character to bring it to life. I like that you've made the wings slightly different color, with this one's coming forward and this one's going back because it's a little darker. That's really a great way to work with the adjustment layers. And I think your background's working really well too. So overall, I think the text is looking quite nice as well. Um, so let's see, what could we work on? With the background, I might be inclined to even more kind of like, see this little bit here, right here? We don't necessarily need that, do we? In terms of, I'm not sure where that is, if I can find that. Okay, so I'm not going to go through your layers here. That might take me too long, but I would probably just keep enlarging this so that you get a little, like you remove that little glip. And I might even try removing this. I don't know if this would like this little piece, because we don't know what it is. It's not necessarily an element that adds to it. So maybe just remove that and see, that will, yeah, again, that'll open up the space a little bit more. I don't know if you tried the content. We did the content aware with the boy, where, or the guy in the photograph on the right, where we removed him completely. And you could try the same thing here. See if you can just kind of lasso that and remove it and see what happens. It works on some things, not everything, but yeah, you could give that a try. You could even give that a try down here as well. Um, okay, your colors. So your colors to me, you've got green and red and then a little bit of these kind of like a lot of neutrals. And then, so green, you've got the green repeating here, which is great. I would see, and then you've got some organic colors here, like these kind of earthy colors. So to me, it feels like you need to kind of maybe do a little bit more work on the colors. Um, how could you work on the colors? Think about like what maybe what your main colors are going to be. Again, it seems like green, I guess red looks like a color, and then maybe try to see if you maybe this needs to be changed. I was gonna say red to match the tomato, but somehow that doesn't seem quite right. Um, it almost seems like it needs to be more background, like it needs to maybe be desaturated a little bit so it's not so bright. So you might want to play with that a little bit more. Um, Sometimes you can also, let's see, your text is in here, and you could try maybe adding a stroke to the text. I'm sort of just thinking, how could you maybe add a little bit of red there? Like maybe that would be a way to bring that in. So you could maybe try, I'm not sure if I can do this, but like a red stroke. I don't know. That makes it pretty busy. I'm not sure if that's the right solution, but so it kind of it starts tying in that red. I don't know if that would be the right thing to do. Maybe you can add a little bit more of a red tint here, or you could even add a little red tint to your silver. Like something you can do too. Let's see if I can find your silver in there. You could even take sort of neutral kinds of things. Um, since we've been working on the selective color, let's go back there. And in here, the neutrals can actually change the color of neutral things. So, for example, we can make the magenta, we'll give it a little bit of that red tone. You see? Maybe add a little bit of yellow to get it a little bit more red looking. So you can try that. You can even do that with this guy here. Maybe make it a little more green or more blue. So I would just kind of keep playing with it. Maybe figure out what you want to do with this. How you can tie this in. Maybe again, does it need to be brown, or maybe it can be another color? Maybe it can be a neutral like a gray. So you can sort of experiment with that. Um, so those are the main things. Um, you know, in a way, I still feel like maybe there's a bit too much extra space around your character. Like there's quite a lot of sort of empty space, and I'd love to see your character a little bit more framed. So if it were me, I'd probably cut off a little bit of the design right here and sort of put my text in a little closer. Kind of see if I could sort of just like again really bring your character inwards a little bit more, like put the focus around it. Um, Okay, so that's what I'd work on a little bit more, just to keep experimenting and see where that takes you. Hi, Nelson. Yeah, I think that's great that you were taking things out of your background using the techniques from this week. That's great. Um, yeah, and overall, I think this is looking good. I think that I really like, again, the text, the way it flows. The background's looking good now. Um, I would just say that I might keep experimenting with the movement of the character, just like I've been, talking to other folks about, what could you do that would bring your character to life just a little bit more. Again, you can do simple things like, um, rotating arms and legs. You can go further and do sort of puppet warp type things, but, just experimenting a little bit more with your character. I think that's the main thing. I'm wondering maybe with your shadow, it feels like perhaps it's a tiny bit too dark. It's nice to have them dark, but maybe, oops, maybe just lighten it a tiny bit. Um, And yeah, I think that's the main thing is, just yeah, keep experimenting with your design a little bit more, seeing how you could bring it to life through maybe the little bit of movement. Okay, Troy. Okay, all right. So in your design, I love this text, and I think the sidewalk is looking really good. Um, So what I might do with your character is maybe continue to remove things from the background or blur things out from the background. Like this area up here, I don't know if it's really necessary, like this area in here, all of this. So you could blur it. You could just kind of selectively blur the whole thing. I think that could look really good. And these leaves in here, so this is a bit of your yellow. Here's the yellow here. So the next thing I might do, I think your text has a lot of movement, which is great. I think that that's looking really good, is maybe just work selectively with the colors here. Again, to kind of think about what colors are going to be your dominant colors. And again, I always start by naming the colors that I already have. So I've got sort of these silvery kind of or gray colors. I've got a little bit of yellowy gold. I've got, pink, sort of magenta, green, blue, some earth tones, in here, and then these orange colors, and then, the green in here, but we are gonna ignore those. So I would reduce it, like whatever you want, whatever colors you think, just maybe your favorite colors or colors are already, your favorite colors in here. You could just reduce those colors. So for example, I mean, I'm very intrigued by this teacup, so I kind of want to see what would happen to it if we did some selective coloring on it. Here's the teacup. Hold on here, let's just get this. So, you could remove, like you could change, any of the colors in here, whatever you wanted to. Like, I guess, so there's green here. What if we matched it to, instead, I don't know, I guess we could match it to the orange. So again, you can go in here, pick the greens. And again, sometimes greens can be greens, but greens can sometimes be a mixture of yellow and cyans. So sometimes you have to start with the color you think it is, if you do want to do this. And then, you can change it. So I'm going to remove what I think the green is made out of, and maybe, oh, I need to, it's not really doing a lot here. Let's see, do I have it on the right layer? It's always a good thing to do. I do. Okay, so that means probably that you'd have to move to a different color, like maybe it's cyan. Sometimes it, yeah, it's kind of, in a way, what it's doing is just removing it without replacing it. So you might have to play with that a little bit more. But I mean, that might not be the color you want to change. But just to say that on the teacup, you can select any, since you have multiple colors in there, you could reduce one or more of them or change them to something else. So I would keep playing with that. See what you can do to sort of bring this together, you know. Maybe you want to just make everything organic, like these kind of, amber, sienna colors, and maybe everything would turn that color, which I could see happening in your design too, to kind of bring it into, like everything has that kind of golden hue. So that's what I'd keep working on. I might make your character a tiny bit bigger. It feels like it's a little bit like I'd move your text up maybe a fraction up there, and then maybe enlarge your character again so it just fills the space just a little bit more. Hey, Minette. All right. Yeah, I love the idea of Flippin' Food Fran being a cook. I think that's really a thing that a lot of people gravitate towards, that she's working on food. Something I think that you want to do, though, is to maybe just allude to the idea of her being in a kind of a kitchen. Like by allude, I mean just kind of like having it just sort of the kind of a hint of that rather than an entire scene. Because what happens is that she gets a little lost with so much detail in the background. So I would be inclined to keep looking for another image here for the background. I'm actually going to turn that image off right now so we can see her. And okay, there she is. Okay, so what I would probably do here is just kind of like kind of just, I would take out all of this, all of these elements. Let's just do that right now. The reason why is because we want the character to be the most important thing in the design. Um, Maybe she could be on a table. I don't know if this image would be big enough to do that. Maybe we'll move that over to the side here. But I would just turn off all of these. I would take her and like just bring her into the center here, expand her, make her bigger, and fill the space. Um, let's just zoom in so we can look at her a little bit more closely. I haven't really had a chance to see her in critique yet, I don't think. There she is. Okay, yeah. So, yeah. So I think, so that's what I want you to do for the next critique is to just do that, even if you don't have a background yet. Just bring her, reorganize it, bring her into the center of the space. We'll take a look at her. If you have time, or the inclination, do some looking on the internet to see if you can find a very simple background, even a wall, like a wall that she stands in front. Really, that's all you need to do. Like, just um, something very simple, or if you can't find something, don't worry about that. Just reorganize her to put in the center. That way we can really take a look at her and see, if do we need to do any more design work with her. At this point, I think your colors are looking good. You're working with orange and yellow, or, yellow and red, I should say, which I think is great. You could sort of maybe experiment a little bit more with the character design, but I would start with that, just filling in the page. So yeah, have that done by Monday. We'll take another look at it on Monday, and then you've got a couple days before the end of the class that maybe you can make a little more progress after we do the next critique. But again, that's probably what I advise at this point, is just really going for the broad strokes. Okay, Elizabeth. Yeah, okay, so let's take a look here. I think you've done some adjustment layers. Yeah, so purple, yeah. So I would say, so the first thing I still want you to look for another background. I feel like this is not a it's like it's a suitable context to have this like kind of empty sort of music room, but I feel like, as I mentioned before, I think I've mentioned before, that this may be a little bit too busy. There's too much going on, and it's not necessarily a really good quality photograph in terms of its composition. So I keep looking like a sound stage, a recording studio, a concert hall, something that's simple, and find something that would work a little bit better. In terms of, let's actually turn that off so we can see your character a little bit better. Okay, so there's your character. Um, I love your text. I think that's really, rocking out. And so something you can try with your design is taking out any of the, I don't know, I think this might be, I would take out any sort of text. A lot of musical instruments have text, so use any of the patching tools that we did previously, and you can just remove all of these guys here. I'll show you how to do the quick technique that is discussed in the video tutorial. So let's look at the drum here. This is going to be a good one. So what we do is we create the non-destructive way to fix your images. It's really cool. So we're going to add another layer here. And then what we'll do is let's just go down a bit here. We'll work directly on this layer, and we can take, let's see here, the spot healing tool, and content aware needs to be selected, sample all layers needs to be selected, and then all we need to do here is just go over this and just remove it. Let's see, that's good. Let's see if we can get rid of that. So I would do all of this, anything that sort of, oh, that didn't work. But let's zoom in a little bit, see if we can, well, should we take that out? Oh, I guess not. So that's not really text. I thought that was text there. But yeah, just sort of kind of clean things up, you know, maybe take this out, put a layer on top of this, take any of this text. I might even be inclined to take this out. Just simplify it. You've got a lot of detail in your character, which is great, but sometimes you want to reduce it a little bit. Then the next thing I would do is just keep working on your color. Using the techniques we've talked about, like choose what colors are you going to be your main colors. Is it going to be red and purple? I think that, your character, I think with the red and purple and gray looks really good. Then maybe turn your text into red and purple, or red or purple, something like that. Think about how your background can relate to that. Maybe make your character a little bit bigger, kind of bring it all the way up to here. Add some movement to your character. Maybe your character's dancing. That seems, rocking out. You can really have some fun with that. And I think with those few changes, I think you're really going to see some, your character come to life even more. Hi Nilda. So in your design, I think your character is, I think that's really, she's really starting to shape up. I like the symmetry you've created and the kind of the fun sort of swirly kind of curvy qualities. So I'm still a little bit concerned about the background. It feels like it's still not quite, it's simpler, but it doesn't seem like it's quite working yet for your character. So I would keep looking for another photograph rather than, tweaking this one. Like maybe something else that you can find on the internet. Let's just remove that for a minute so we can see your character. Yeah, so now we can really start seeing your character a little bit more. Um, and I think just maybe the strawberry head, I think maybe you might want to work a little bit more on the head. It feels like, can you see how the edges are a little bit rough? That's actually caused by the original image, because it's not actually your selection looks okay, but there's a lot of, can you see how this edge, we're missing that edge because it's against another strawberry? So Photoshop doesn't know how to select that. So I'd find a strawberry, just go to Google Images and find a strawberry without a lot of stuff around it so that you can select it a little bit easier. Okay, and I might do the same thing. It looks like maybe your bananas may have had the same issue. Yeah, it's this is a little bit better, but I think that maybe it's like a just a better photograph of a banana would be good. For and then for your text, I think your text, is fun and it seems to sort of fit your character. I would just work a little bit more on the colors using the kind of techniques we've talked about, like you've got sort of browns and reds in here. So maybe kind of try to match them a little bit more. Kind of play with, experiment with your color harmony. A lot of it depends upon your background. So keep experimenting. I might reduce the arc a little bit here of your text, like sort of soften it a little bit so that your text stays, let's see, I'm not sure if I can do this with your text, but yeah, I don't have your text, but kind of fit it into a smaller space, um, so that your character can fill the space a little bit more. Okay, that's what I'd like you to work on a little bit, and then we'll take another look on Monday. Okay, Bernadette. Yeah, it's always the question, what um, adjustment layer to work with. Let's see. Let me see what you had here. Yeah, I can see why you did that. It's a little more subdued. It allows your character to pop a little bit more. So, yeah, I would say that what you're trying to do, as I've mentioned before, is to try to see what colors work in your design, and that's in a way what guides your adjustment layers. Yeah, so sorry about that. I just got a call and I had to answer. Yeah, so so your colors. Let's say take a look at your colors. They're kind of like gold. There's a bit of gold, red, and grays and silvers, and it's already starting to look pretty harmonious in terms of the colors. Um, the background, I might consider sort of, you mentioned what can you do with the adjustment layer? Maybe if you want to kind of like, I kind of feel like maybe there's an opportunity to bring it a little bit more into the color harmony. Maybe, let's see, where is that adjustment layer? Let's bring that up here. So you could play around with it, maybe. Hmm. So that's kind of like getting in, like kind of like getting it a little more into the gold category, like, well, even that, kind of matching this. So we could try that. I think too, for yours, I might consider going into this adjustment layer that we've been looking at called selective color. We've done that for a few different people, and it's just so wonderful. So you would take your blues here and you can kind of play around with them selectively. Like let me look at, so you've got blues and magentas in here. So you can sort of separately change them, which is really interesting. So you could, if you wanted to, so you can take your magenta, let's go to your magentas here, because you have some beautiful magentas here. So you could turn those into, you could just make them a little maybe redder. So kind of play with that if you wanted to. So I'm just adding yellow because they were already kind of magenta, so maybe a little yellow. Um, Again, this is where you can sort of play around with them. Oh, that's a little too much. Yeah, so you can sort of like kind of play around with your colors. You can go into the blues if you want your blues to look more, I think this is probably going to be in the blues here. Maybe making it look more yellow. You could make more yellow, put yellow into it. Reduce the magenta. There's all kinds of interesting things. Again, sort of, I'd have to play with this for a while because there's kind of multiple colors in here, but you can sort of selectively kind of change the colors. Ooh, that's kind of cool. But like to kind of play around with it to get your like relating to the colors in your particular your design. Again, I haven't really moved it in any direction, but it would take a little bit more time for me to do that. So that's what I work on. Maybe a little more movement in your character. I love the arms. I think that's very cute what you've done with that. Like maybe even the body, like so, tilting the body can be really a way to add some movement, you know? You see how that, even that kind of really changes it. Do the same with the head. You can sort of tilt them in different directions. Even subtle ones. I'm kind of doing big ones, but you can even do smaller ones, and that can really, that can really like add to, now your character looks like he's really in motion. So I'd keep playing with that. I don't know if you thought about maybe reducing, like removing the text in here, because sometimes text kind of, we start trying to read the text, which is, we only want to really be reading the text up here. So you might want to do that little trick where we took, remember that, that trick from the tutorial from the task this week, the classroom in a book exercise of adding an extra layer, and then you can take any of the tools. Make sure that you've got both of these boxes selected, content aware and sample all layers, and then you can kind of go through and, you can remove stuff, some of the text. Sometimes it works better. Sometimes working with the content aware, different tools like that kind of made a little bit of a smudge, but you can sort of get the idea of kind of going through here, and maybe you don't even need to remove all of it, but maybe some of it. See? Oh, that's kind of gave a smudge. So I think maybe a different tool there, like the patch tool, might work a little bit better. So I might work on that. And I think that's the main thing. So your cast shadow, it looks like what you're doing is adding drop shadows for everything. Rather than doing that, because what that does is it just kind of creates a halo around everything. Um, which I don't think is really going to add, like, I think you want to have your cast shadow on the ground. And remember that technique that we looked at back in last week? There was a cast shadow tutorial in the instructions. I would use that and cast it onto the floor. That'll make it look more realistic. Okay. Okay, so those are some of the same things. Your text, it's bright, it's easy to read, that's really great, but I'd love to see you working into the color harmony. Like maybe it could be a really bright red to match this, or this gold color here, you could just kind of make it a golder color. Just kind of look at it and see what happens, but sort of blend it into your design. So those are just some things to kind of keep thinking about. Gabriel, yeah. So in your design, you have a great opportunity here to work with color. So I would do exactly the technique that I've talked about with other folks, is to pick colors like a couple, maybe two colors or three colors maximum, and then change everything else in your design to those colors. Even though I know that the rainbow colors are really cute, but it doesn't necessarily make for a good design to have that many colors in a design. So you've got some, couple greens here. Maybe you would just turn all of these to green. Use the exactly the color, this, the selective color adjustment layer that we've been going over. That will be your best friend here to change these colors. You can change anything, but I would just kind of go through and see what you want to work with. Um, your background, you have a great image for your background. I'm not sure if this is really working very well, like a lot of these shadows yet. I would keep playing this. So now this is, yeah, so what's happening here with, yeah, it seems to be just kind of darkening your image, but in a way that's not quite, it's sort of hiding all of the beautiful parts of your design, you know? So like it was, and your background, by the way, is a really beautiful color scheme. It's got these earthy tones. Maybe that would be what you want to work with here. You could turn all of these into earthy colors, and so your character, instead of being so bright, would be really subdued. Like we can go to this, and I think why that might be interesting for your character is because it could look kind of more terrible that way, kind of weirder, because rainbow bright colors are always sort of happy. And so maybe it could be a little darker, like darker in terms of emotional kind of character qualities. So you could go to your selective color here and you could take and just sort of play around with um, your colors. This is where I wonder if hue and saturation might work here. You might want to desaturate it first. These kind of colors, these tend to not, darken the colors so much, but to change their hue. So maybe you need to work with hue and saturation for this one. And maybe just work on the master layer, like the whole thing, like you could probably desaturate it, you know, something like that. Yeah, I don't think that's very nice, but you can sort of play with it. So even that starting to kind of look a little more unified, you could sort of, so it's up to you. You can really play with it. Like maybe you want to just turn all of them into one color using selective color. But whatever you do, just kind of keep sort of being a little more deliberate about your choices, whatever you want to do with them. I'm going to turn these off right now. I don't think they're quite working yet. That's where you really have to play. So I would work with your text, make sure pick a color that's going to make your text stand out. And yeah, keep playing with it. Keep playing with the movement of your character. Right now it seems a little stiff. I would love to see you do something with the puppet warp to kind of maybe pull some of these guys out. Like you can kind of stretch them and do kind of interesting things. Maybe just, again, making it look, maybe you could kind of curve this so it looks like it's bouncing. Just kind of have fun with it, experiment a little bit more.